from the College by the Lake, Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. Local, regional, national, and international guests discussing the issues and topics affecting the way you live are on Forum, the North Idaho College Public Forum, with your host and moderator, political scientist Tony Stewart.
We're very pleased today to bring you as our program Kids Voting USA. We have done this topic before, but we are particularly happy to do it again today because we have a member of the national staff with us to talk about what has happened, along with the executive director for the state of Idaho in this particular program. First of all, I welcome to the program Sherry Middleswart, who is the community education specialist for Kids Voting USA. She holds a BA degree in education and a master's in education in learning and instructional technology from Arizona State University. She also was the project manager and instructional designer for a $2.3 million National Science Foundation grant, which created professional development CD-ROMs based on the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics Standards. So she has the very fine credentials to talk about education, curriculum, and kids voting in particular, where she now is staffed. I also welcome to the program Lori Barnes, who is the executive director of Idaho Kids Voting. She is also the owner of the SCI Management. To both of you, it's a pleasure to have you on the program, and we look forward to talking about a very important subject that has really become very important across the United States in dealing with democracy and voting. I am very pleased to have Steve Schenck as our regular panelist. He is the Dean of College Relations and Development at North Idaho College, and I shall ask Steve to start today's question.
Thank you, Tony. Sherry, let's start with you, if we may, and I thought I would ask you to tell our viewers a little bit about the background of kids voting. Maybe you could tell us where it started, when, and how it's developed.
Okay, kids voting actually started back in 1988. And what happened was 3 businessmen from Arizona were on a fishing trip in Costa Rica, and they found out that the voter turnout in Costa Rica is consistently 90%, which of course is very different than it is in our country. Mm-hmm. And they started to look at why that was. And what they found out was that in Costa Rica, families go to the polls together. And children have been in the polls many, many, many times before they vote as adults. And that was what was attributed to the high voter turnout. So that's really where the idea for kids voting came from. They came back and in 1988, Arizona did a pilot project in a suburb of Phoenix to start the kids voting program, and then it kind of grew from there. In 1992, it went national to 11 states. In 1994, it doubled again to include 22 states. That's when Idaho joined us. And then in 1996, we were in 40 states and the District of Columbia, so it's doubled each year.
It's obviously a national organization represented in 4/5 of the states in America. What kind of national structure does it have? Lori, do we pay dues to the National Association, and how does the whole thing work?
Actually, it's a license, and a state, Coeur d'Alene area, this group right here are the ones that licensed for the state of Idaho. So each state is licensed, and then within the state, individual communities will come on board. But in order to keep the dissemination of information in a consistent manner, that's why they have the one funnel to the state. So you have the national organization that works on developing curriculum, training, all those type of things are very, very important, especially on the curriculum side. And then it branches out to the states, and from the states to the individual communities. Do you know how many communities voted?
Oh, I'm not sure. I'm not sure the exact number.
Thousands. Thousands
yeah.
of communities.
I know
that
the local election, there was 100, in 1997, the local election was 170 communities involved in kids voting.
In the local election, and in the general, it was, I'm sure, well, it was almost 4 million students.
Right, I think it was 4.5 million in 1996
right.
involved.
At the local level, is it typically organized around communities as opposed to being organized around individual school districts, or is both? Are both possible?
Basically, it has to start in the community before it can get to the schools.
I see.
And so what will happen is the community will start the program. They'll need to get funding and support to be able to do it, because the key piece to the curriculum is that children go to the polls on election day and vote. So we need to have that piece in place. Once you have that, then we go to the schools and do some teacher training and give them the kids voting curriculum, which is a kindergarten through 12th grade curriculum. It's an action-packed series of activities that students actually learn the democratic process. And
I'm going to stick with numbers for a little while. Help me, Tony. This show is seen in what surrounding states? In Washington?
It is seen in portions of 7 states, including all of Idaho, and excuse me, it also goes into Canada.
I was just wondering which of our neighboring states might also have, some of our viewers might be interested to know whether this program is available, for instance, in Montana, Washington, Utah,
Oregon,
and
so forth.
And actually, all of those that you've named, Kids Voting does have a pilot project in those states.
Excellent. And there is no equivalent organization in Canada at this time?
Not at this time, there is not.
Thank you.
I would like to get into some of the curriculum. I'm very familiar with this program and served on the board here in Idaho for a period of time. And Sherry, may I start with you? I know that you have a very sophisticated, developed curriculum. It's been in place for some time, and you're here in Idaho to do some training with teachers, and we thank you for coming to our state. Would you please share with us the structure and the content of that curriculum? And I know it will change as students advance to higher grades, but just an overall discussion of what the curriculum is like that the teachers have to use with the students.
Basically, in designing the curriculum, we looked at what do you need to be an informed citizen in a democracy. And we came up with 3 core things. You need to be an information gatherer, you need to be able to make critical decisions, and you need to be able to cooperate. And so those are woven throughout our curriculum. And interestingly enough, when you talk to businesses about what they want their employees to be able to do, they'll tell you the same thing. They want them to be able to find information, they want them to make decisions, and they want them to be able to work with others. And so the curriculum really focuses in on those pieces. For example, for gathering information, the newspapers are used, news media is used, and students research and find out about candidates and platforms. They find out about propositions and issues, and they really do a lot of study on that, so they learn to gather information.
Can they also get literature from candidates, or candidates can visit in some of the
That
programs?
is a piece. We strive for nonpartisan, so if a teacher decides to have a candidate come and speak, we want to guarantee that the other candidate is given equal time to present and to be a part of that. But a lot of what the curriculum does is it's a very active learning piece. It's based on really having the experience. For example, in the 4th grade curriculum, we have an activity that's called 2 ballots, and it illustrates the point to students that they need to gather information. What they do is they get ballot A, and it says things like ice cream and homework, and they have to mark yes or no. That's all the information they get. And what you find is they say ice cream, yes, homework, no. And then you give them the next ballot, ballot B, and ballot B has the same thing, but a little bit more information. For example, the ice cream one now says there will only be garlic-flavored ice cream served. Well, if they just marked yes, guess what? The homework says there'll be no homework given. So if they marked no on the first ballot, they just marked no to not having any homework. So they get the feeling that, I can't just go in and mark a ballot. I need to know what I'm marking. And it teaches them to be critical consumers of information. When you look at the decision-making piece, we really try to empower students through choice in the curriculum, and we want to make sure that their choice is honored. For example, even in the kindergarten curriculum, there's an activity called the voting chain, where they give a yes or no question. It could be something, it needs to be something that the students will be acted upon. It might be, we'll do reading first and then we'll do math. You choose which subject you want to do first. And then they vote on the voting chain, and whatever decision was made by the class is what decision is acted out. And when they look at that voting chain, it's a visual representation of democracy in action. They can see their own vote on the chain. They can imagine what that chain would look like if their vote wasn't on that chain. And they really get the feeling that that chain would look different if my vote weren't on there. So we really want them to get the idea that your vote does make a difference.
Also share with us the contrast of what happens at that level with the high school level, for example, where it's more sophisticated, and I would assume not only the exercises, but the projects would be more inclusive of what is actually going on in the political arena.
One of the keys to this project is community involvement, and as the students get older, they become more able to be involved in the community. We have pieces in the curriculum that allow high school students to go and work at polling sites. They can volunteer at the kids' voting booths. They can volunteer for a candidate. In Arizona, we had an example of a high school class that writes a voter's guide every year, and they sell advertising space, and they print this 3-page newspaper that they get out to the community about all of the information on the election. So there's a lot of service-oriented projects that students can do, especially in the middle school and high school levels.
Lori, I know that you've been to most of the national conferences with kids voting, and you also are a director of a large region, in addition to your work in Idaho. could you share with us or build upon what Sherry has talked about concerning some uniquenesses that one finds in the program in each state, because there is that creativity permitted. What has Idaho done that's somewhat different from some other states, or what you have shared with the national meetings?
Interesting. Yeah, and it is done differently. The plus in this program is that you're getting this curriculum, wonderful curriculum for the national level, but the way we implement it is different. And every state is different. Every area is different. Some states actually have the Secretary of State's office that helps with the election. Here in Idaho, we're all volunteer. And so we have, in the polling places, we have volunteers. As you know, Tony, you work there, I work there, and it is so incredible. And we did have the high school students also that come. And to sit there on election day and watch the kids come in, they are so excited to vote. They just practically run in that enthusiasm. And of course, on the ballots, we had pictures. And you would not believe how many parents wanted to come look at the kids' ballots to see the pictures of the candidates, because that would help them. I think you're going to see certain things the same everywhere you go. The enthusiasm is the same. The curriculum is the same. The sophistication of the implementation of the program is going to be different depending on how long. We in Idaho are really still at the beginning stages compared to what some of the other states are doing. Some of them are having kids-ventions, like a convention. But it's not a Republican convention or a Democrat convention. It is a kids-vention. And they bring the candidates in, and it's just wonderful. I am so excited to see that come. We're going to be doing that in Idaho soon.
Steve Sheen.
Lori, the national organization gets fees from state and local organizations to help cover its costs. And you said that Idaho is an all-volunteer organization, yet I assume that there are still some costs involved with the program. Where does the funding come from to pay for it?
Good question. It is all private. There are no government funds. We have here, our project here, most of them have been from individual businesses. We have the Coeur d'Alene Press and Hagedorn Corporation has been tremendous supporters. Excuse me. We've had Idaho Forest Industries, Crown Pacific, Century Communications. We've had car lots, restaurants, you name it, banks, all the different companies. Some give $100, some give $1,000. It works out to about $2.50 per student to get the program started. And a big portion of that is the printing of the curriculum. And then you're going to have expenses. You know, if you're going to give teachers posters and decorations, and on election day you want to do the red, white, and blue, those type of things. And so the funds are used for that too. We're hoping that the funding will decrease each year because you don't need to reprint the curriculum. Because our goal is to have this a real grassroots organization. If we have parents manning the polls, and once the teachers are trained and as part of the curriculum, then we're over that hump. But it is all private donations. We have applied for some grants. We've applied for an Albertsons grant and also a School to Work grant, so we're looking forward to those too.
I am working around to a question about how people start these organizations, but before I do, Sherry, how's the program typically, you're an educator, how's the program typically received in schools?
That is a very good question. And one of the things that people always say is, how do teachers fit this in? You know, their plate is full. They have lots to do. The good news about it is that the goals of the curriculum match many of the goals of the state curriculum and also the national standards. I just recently indexed the entire curriculum to the national standards for social studies. And what we found was that more than half of the standards are met by this curriculum. So it really is not something extra. In addition, part of the reason teachers enjoy it so much is it is a lot of fun. It is very empowering for students, and teachers all the time call me and say, this is more fun than I've ever had in my classroom. So it really is an exciting thing to do. Also, I think another reason teachers use it so often is that we really do listen to them. I get calls from teachers all the time that say, you know, I really wish you'd do something with technology, or I really wish you'd do something to bridge literature to this curriculum. And so we respond to that yearly with different updates. And part of what we've done this year is put a technology piece into place and put a literature piece and also a service learning to get high school and middle school students involved in the community.
We're familiar with service learning here at North Idaho College, as a matter of fact. So the curriculum is evolving, and I assume that's a big part of your responsibility.
Yes.
Okay. One more, if I may, Tony, one more sort of a pre-question, and then we'll get to the big question. 88, started in 88, is that right? There's some time to do some outcomes assessment in that 10-year period. What are your studies telling you is the effect of kids voting on voting behaviors of students who've been through the program?
We've found two things. At this point, we have not been able to do a long-term study. We are getting to that point to be able to look at kids that were in the kids voting program and whether or not they vote later. We're looking to do that in the future for studies, but right now we have some studies that show the effect of voter turnout. And what we find is that with communities that have kids voting, there's an increase between 3 and 5% in adult voter turnout. In addition, we have some research that shows that students who've been through this curriculum tend to read the newspaper more and tend to talk to their families about political issues more than students without this program.
Nagging children can be a wonderful motivator for their parents. So what you're saying is the effect that you can measure now is that the parents of these students tend to vote more.
Definitely.
Now, the big question.
Could I, before you move on,
certainly.
could I add on to that for the local level? Because here in Idaho, we found the response tremendous. We started with a local election. Was it 95, Tony? I think 95. And as you know, local elections have low turnout. And so we thought this is a good test for the program to see how it worked. On election day, we had, as a matter of fact, Tony's political science class, students from that class interview parents as they left if they had a student with them. And we had over 30% of the parents said they would not have voted if their parents had, or excuse me, if their children had not been in the program. But even more importantly than that, in my mind, over 60% of the parents said they were better informed on the issue because of their child being in the program. And I think back to your one lesson, gathering information, making critical decisions, to have better informed voters is just as important as having more voters. And so we're seeing that as sort of an added bonus.
And I'm pushing my luck on time here, especially in a political science arena here. But I'm sure there are people watching the show who don't have kids voting programs in their schools. How would they go about starting a program in their community?
How long do we have? 30-second answer, 2-minute answer?
We'll get to
We're okay. All right. You need 3 important components of the program. You need to have the education component, so you need to have your school board and your teachers involved. You also need to have the community. It is community funded and community supported. You also need to have your elected officials. If you're going to have a kids voting booth right in with a regular election, you have to have your county clerks, your Secretary of State's office. So those 3 components all need to be addressed: elected officials, community, and educators. For information on how to do that, anyone listening just needs to find out if they have a kids voting in their state. It's an easy name to remember. Just check with information: kids voting Idaho, kids voting Washington, kids voting Montana, kids voting Utah, kids voting USA. They also have a page, a web page.
There's also a website. And right now there's currently a website already posted. It's a pretty easy web address. It's kidsvotingusa.org is the address. And on March 1st, we're going to unveil our updated web page, which has more student-focused activities on it, as well as some further information and just a little bit more current information.
And then once a person said would like information, again, back to your organizational structure questions, if there is already a kids voting organization in the state person, in Idaho it would be me, would come to that community and talk to them and say, this is what you need to do to get started. If the state did not yet have a state program, someone from national would come.
Thank you.
Again, as I said earlier, we are fortunate to have you here, Sherry, to do some training with teachers and other staff people that are involved with education. But we have many viewers that will not have the opportunity to come to your workshop, and so I'd like to take this opportunity in the program to have you to share with them some information. So my question really addresses that desire, and that is, when you're in a workshop with teachers, what are some of the do's and don'ts that you've learned over time, some of the things that you're going to share while you're here with teachers that make it helpful in implementing kids voting?
Well, one of the nice things about the kids voting program is that the curriculum really speaks for itself. And everything that the curriculum strives for, active participation, active learning, cooperation, empowerment, all of those pieces are a piece of the kids voting training. We really do practice what we preach and how we teach teachers how to use the kids voting curriculum. So there by itself it's going to be a really high energy, exciting training.
So you have the teachers interested already because they're not having to go into a completely new area and add more to the plate in the way that the first concern might be. And then when you get them to that point, what do you do from there?
Basically, it's the goal of the training is to familiarize them with the curriculum and talk about ways to implement it within their classroom. and also some ways to extend the curriculum. And so one of the first things that we'll do as they come in, of course, is do a voting activity that is modeled after the curriculum so that they will see how that works. The next thing that we do in the in-service is take a really good look at the curriculum. We have a couple fun ways to get it, searching through the curriculum. We have a game that's called Search and Share where they look for things. They look for activities that a family could do together. They might look for an activity that is empowering to students. They might try to find an activity that requires cooperation. And so the teachers go through and really mark up their own curriculum, putting little post-it notes and things on that so that they really get a good look at the curriculum. We also do a lot about the current educational research and the trends so that teachers who are so busy, and teachers never get to read anything other than their students' work, so we really try to put some of those new current research things into play during the in-service so that not only do they get training in the kids' voting curriculum, but they stay current and fresh on what's happening in education.
When you're teaching a class and you're teaching a lot of different subjects to the lower grades, is there one particular area where it's better to plug in kids voting, or can you vary, like is it in the social studies, or does it fit in mathematics and so forth? Do you recommend to the teachers that they plug it in at a particular segment of the...
We actually find that in the middle school and in the high school it fits best with the social studies curriculum, but we also find that some of the activities work for English teachers as well. So we kind of focus on those two areas for the high school and middle school. For the elementary level, a lot of it is interdisciplinary. You can get, you might do one lesson and you might be doing some math because you might be talking about voter turnout. You might be doing some English because you'd be writing about it. So it really is an interdisciplinary thing. I would say it fits probably most easily in your social studies curriculum, but it definitely has its roots in other areas of the curriculum.
And don't you also have a guide that tells the teachers, and I believe we have, like you have the Idaho standards, and every state, and so it will say if you're doing this lesson, if you're teaching this, go to kids voting here. And so it's lined out for them.
Sherry, I want to follow up with a question that I'm always very convinced that it is always good not to reinvent the wheel. And I know that some of the schools within some states have been doing this program for some time. And let's suppose we're talking about a school that's bringing on the kids voting program. What are some of the things that you would recommend that they look out for that to avoid those mistakes, to get off to a good start?
I think to start small, start with the basics. The curriculum is organized in such a way that there are some core activities that you can do, and then there's some more activities that you can do. And I would start with that core. Basically, the core is about 10 lessons that takes between 5 and 20 minutes a day to do, and it really prepares students to go to the polls with their parents and vote. So I would start there, and then you can always go bigger and always go better with adding new activities and extending the curriculum. But I'd start with the basics first.
And that way you take it step by step, and there's more likely to continue the program than if you have some problems and get discouraged.
Right, and you also want to, as a school principal or as a superintendent of a school who has the kids voting program, you want to encourage your teachers to use it and encourage them and recognize their success as they start this program. Because it's not a difficult program, it's a really fun program to do, but it really works much better if everyone's involved in it.
I might add on that, Tony, too, that some of the lessons are community-based. We do the wish tree ceremony, where it's not just one teacher in one classroom. We're doing it as a community, and that's always fun. And those are ones that we hope every teacher would start with, because you get that sense of community that's great.
Sure. Steve Shink.
I'm wondering if you have experienced either on the local level or the national level any resistance, either from community members or from teachers or from parents who are afraid that the program will be politicized?
I would say definitely when we first looked at it, as a matter of fact, when it was brought to me and said, Lori, would you do this? That was the first thing I did, was check that. And I called around the country, actually, to other principals and teachers and parents and found that that is one of the core beliefs, that this is nonpartisan. And in fact, what we found is that many teachers want to teach civics and how to be involved in the democratic process, but in doing it, they have a tendency to sway off into areas. With this curriculum, they're safe. If they follow the curriculum, then they don't have to worry about getting into areas that they shouldn't be. So we have found that the people that at first were concerned that the curriculum might favor one candidate over another now sees that in fact what it does is help a teacher to teach the concept without worrying about it. So it's been excellent.
Have you found any significant difference at all in the enthusiasm level, acceptance level, effectiveness level of the program, younger grades versus higher grades, for instance, or it seems to be well accepted across grade levels?
It's pretty well accepted across grade levels. I would say we have a little bit more success with the elementary level, because when you get to high school and you're talking about a high school teacher who teaches civics or government, they're really a content expert. They do that all day, so they really know their subject well. But the thing that we've brought into it is the service learning piece, which has really excited a lot of our high school teachers. And also, we have a core of high school teachers that write lessons for us. And so we find that when they write the lessons and they come from firsthand knowledge of what their students need to be able to do, we find that the lessons are strong and well accepted by high school teachers as well.
And I might add to that also, at the secondary level, it grows beyond the 5 or 10 minute classroom. We have students at Lake Middle School that created a web page for kids voting, and we'll keep that up. And we're now developing a kids voting student council. So the lessons themselves are just the beginning at the secondary level, and then it moves into the service.
Sure, we've mentioned service learning twice on the program. I wonder if you'd take just a second and briefly explain what that program is.
Certainly. Service learning is basically another way to say real-world community involvement. It has students choose a project that they're interested in that serves the community. And one of the things that they could do is maybe a voter registration drive. And so they have to figure out how to go about doing that. What are the steps we need to take? And then they implement that voter registration drive and then report their success. So it really is a hands-on, authentic thing that they're going to participate in.
Less than a minute left. Lori, any quick advice to people who are organizing programs? Anything you stubbed your toe on when you were starting the program here?
No. I'm trying to think real quick. Stub the toe. It's you go easy. You make sure you have all 3 components. We went to the teachers first. We did not want this to be from the board down. We went to teachers. We said, what do you think? Is this worthwhile? Ownership. You get everyone involved. If parents are involved, students are involved, communities involved, elected officials are involved, you'll have a successful program.
Of course, you have to also get some money.
Well, yeah, you got to have money. Thanks for bringing me back to reality, Tony.
I remember those discussions at the board, the meetings that we had. The other thing I'd mention, too, in the little time we have left, and I suppose, sure, you might echo this in agreement, and that is that when you have an off-year election, like a municipal election, it's more difficult to get the kind of participation you get if it's a presidential year, because that's very dynamic and exciting in those years.
Right. One of the things we've done to try to help that is we have a local election supplement to our curriculum to try to bring up interest in those local elections.
On that note, we have to bring the program to conclusion. On behalf of Steve Schenck and our staff, we thank both of you very much and congratulate you for the exciting program called Kids Voting USA. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you've enjoyed our program, and I'd like to invite you to be with us again next week at this same time when we shall discuss yet another issue. Until then, please have a good week. I am Tony Stewart.
The North Idaho College Public Forum was videotaped live from the studios of Instructional Technology on the campus of North Idaho College for viewing at this more appropriate time. We invite you to join us again next week for another all-new edition of the North Idaho College Public Forum on this public television station.